Innovation, imagination, wonder. These are just some of the words used to describe Dr. Harvey Passes. Dr. Passes explores interesting people and ideas that will stimulate you. He questions the people who develop, create, and employ novel concepts in business and everyday lives. He especially loves to speak with successful people. How did they do it? How can you do it too? So let's join Dr. Harvey Passes in his quest of wonder and curiosity as we watch Dr. Harvey Passes Presents.
A few weeks ago, something happened of gargantuan proportion. Now, it's not something that never happened before. It certainly did, but not to this degree. Its scope was so unfathomable, and it affected so many people that it has affected so many people into maybe thinking in another fashion. And I thought that it would be a good idea to have someone come down here to have a conversation with me about this topic. I'm talking about the betrayal of one individual to another as far as trust is concerned. I'm talking about what Bernie Madoff did. And this is not a funny show. This is not a warm, fuzzy, cozy show. This is a real-life show. And it's something that you might want to sit down for next 30 minutes and watch and get some interesting information that you might not get so easily any other place. I asked my rabbi, Rabbi Todd Chizner from Temple, Judea, to come down here today to converse with me about what has transpired. Now, we're not going to be talking about how much money this person lost and what is set in the cards for Bernie Madoff and the law. That is outside of our scope. What is rather more important is what has happened as far as this one individual who's Jewish, and he has indeed affected so many other Jewish people because the greatest number of his victims were Jewish. And we're going to discuss all of this. How something like this could have happened. Is this something that Jewish people are accustomed to or not? We're going to explode some myths and give you actually some good reason to think about something that you might not have ordinarily done. So, with that opening, I will introduce to you again, because he's been on the show, luckily in the past, and it's Rabbi Todd Chizner. Rabbi.
Good to see you, Dr. Passes.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and I always love talking with you.
Well, thank you. I mean, as you said before, this unfortunately is not a happy show because we have to discuss something very serious.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, I wanted you to be on because I looked at one article and then I had seen another open letter that you had given me, and I just thought it would be perfect opportunity for us to have a conversation about what's transpired and how it relates to Judaism. Or should it relate to Judaism? And for example, in the New York Times on, where the heck is the date? This was, I think, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. We had an article in the New York Times, and it says, for Jews, Madoff scandal brings feelings of betrayal and shame. And indeed, one of your colleagues, Rabbi David Wolpe, is it Wolpe or Wolpe?
Wolpe.
Wolpe, I was right. Okay. And a couple of other rabbis were in here. Kalmanovsky, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, and some others were interviewed for this very insightful article in the New York Times, all about that among Jews, Madoff evokes raw feelings. I'm going to take a moment to read an article, and then we're just going to get into it, because another contemporary of yours, Rabbi Mark Gelman, an esteemed individual, wrote this article in Newsweek, an open letter to Bernie Madoff. And with your kind permission, I'm going to read you something that I think you're going to find very interesting. Normally, I don't like reading things on TV. This deserves to be read. Here we go. Rabbi Mark Gelman says in his letter to, was published in Newsweek, Dear Bernie Madoff, I don't think you know what you have done. Life inevitably inflicts upon us different kinds of wounds. Very few people can live connected lives and not occasionally fail those who depend upon them and trust them. However, these are failures, not betrayals. They come from trying to do the right thing and not being able to do it. A betrayal is different than a failure. A betrayal is an intentional wounding. It is born of cruelty, not ignorance. Most of us know of failures and betrayals. What you have done, however, is to radically expand the scope and viciousness of betrayal. You betrayed not just your friends, but your closest friends. You betrayed the trust of those who entrusted you with everything they have saved. You betrayed charities whose good works you have extinguished in an afternoon. These betrayals are epic in their scope and dazzling in their utter lack of remorse or responsibility. There must be some new word invented to describe the way you have redefined betrayal. The Bible calls such things as tova, an abomination. It means an act so alien to our values and our natures that it cannot be understood or explained. You have committed an abomination. This is what you have done. Another thing you did was make life incredibly more difficult for people who sell real and honorable and legitimate money products. Now, every stockbroker and money manager and hedge fund operator and insurance rep who have already had a tough time convincing prospective clients that what they are selling is good and honest must now also convince them that they are not like you. An entire world economy we now know is based to an immense degree on simple trust, and you have done more than any single person to destroy that trust. You are a financial terrorist. Your attack has toppled the foundations of trust in our financial markets. Although you are not by any means the only financial terrorist, you are its most reviled attacker. What has brought us down are not worthless financial instruments, but worthless people. Many business people have always known and have never forgotten that trust is all the collateral they have ever placed against a loan. Your name is on people's lips now, but the ones out there selling their honest products at a fair price ought to push your name into the gutter where it belongs. This is what you have done. One of the very worst things you did has to do with the Jews. You are responsible for reviving the Jew game. I heard of the Jew game from a boy who became a man last Saturday. I asked him once if he had ever experienced anti-Semitism in school. That is, when he looked at the floor and told me about the Jew game. The game, played by anti-Semitic kids at school, was one in which they would hide around a corner, throw a quarter down the hall, and then when somebody picked up the quarter, they'd run at the person shouting, "You're the Jew!" You did not cause the anti-Semitic insults about Jews and money, but you caused them to be revived. Not since Julius Rosenberg spied for the Soviet Union has one person so damaged the image and the self-respect of American Jews. I am not comfortable with the fact that so many of the articles about you specifically identify your prominent place in the Jewish community. Ken Lay of Enron shame was never identified as a prominent Protestant energy broker. The most aggressive accusers of the governor of Illinois seldom describe him as the prominent Serbian-American governor of Illinois. Yes, it is unfair that your Jewishness should become or has become a part of the storyline, but you just reminded your bigots, those who grew up playing the Jew game, that still strikes a familiar chord. You wiped out Joe Lieberman's accomplishments. You revived ancient bigotry against our people. You gave credence to the horrid accusations about Jews being untrustworthy and greedy. One offensive paper has a column called Jews in the News, which focuses on some Jewish criminal or other to remind their sickening readers of the legitimacy of anti-Semitism. You are not just one of the Jews in the news they seek. You are the apotheosis of their hate-filled world. You have given the Jew haters material for a decade of hate gardening. You single-handedly revived the Jew game. This is what you have done. Most of those you've deceived will learn to live and give in new and perhaps more modest ways. Unlike your evil, which has been stopped, nothing will stop their courage and compassion. Some of your victims will no doubt be more severely wounded in circumstance and in spirit, but none of them, I pray, will surrender to your assault. Their friends will not leave them. Their children and grandchildren will not refuse to hug them and kiss them. After their initial trauma subsides, they will, I believe, move on to cling to the blessings that cannot ever be stolen. You, on the other hand, will lose everything. Everything. From this day to the end of your life, there will be none who will trust you. To be mistrusted by everyone is an enormous curse, and you have brought this all upon yourself. And for what purpose? You are supposed to be the master of risk and reward, and you asked everything from everyone. For what reward? You have not just made a bad calculation about how money works. You have made a bad calculation about how life works. You gave no value to what matters and all value to what does not matter. This is what you have done. Shame on you, Bernie Madoff. Shame on you. I could not resist reading this letter, an open letter to Bernie Madoff. Rabbi.
Well, I have to say that thank you for reading Rabbi Gelman's words. I just want to point out that I had the pleasure and privilege of being Rabbi Gelman's assistant for 7 years.
Right.
And so hearing his words as often as I did for those 7 years, and each and every time feeling that sense that I just felt right now of wow, that power, that sense that he has captured something that truly states what the situation is. And, you know, in some respects, after reading this, I said to myself, he's said it all. And he has said things that maybe other people have not said, and put them in perspective, and just the scope and the vastness of what has taken place here. But I think that at the core of this, the value that was violated the most, I mean, and really, you mentioned this, Rabbi Gelman mentions this, is that value of trust. It is that thing that binds us together, every single relationship we have, and especially in relationships where we're involving money.
How important in Judaism is trust?
It's interesting, you know, I was thinking about that question during this time period when this whole scandal came out. We were reading in the Torah the story about Joseph and his brothers. And Joseph is betrayed by his brothers.
That's right.
He has that colorful coat that his father gives him. He tells his brothers of the dreams, where they bow down to him, and they first plot to kill him, and then they sell him into slavery, and he's taken to Egypt, and that whole saga of his life. Eventually, he interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. He becomes second in command over all of Egypt. And then when there's a famine in the land of Canaan, sure enough, his brothers come to Egypt. They don't recognize him. They're standing arrayed before him. They bow to him, which fulfills that dream that he told them. And then we see that he has a choice. He has a choice of whether or not to forgive his brothers, to give them another chance, to invite them down to Egypt. And he's waiting to see. He's waiting to see something that becomes extremely important. If one of them will put a trust of themselves onto another brother, if they will stand up for another brother. And so he intentionally creates a scheme where the youngest brother, his full brother, Benjamin, will be caught or appear to be caught stealing something very precious to him, to Joseph.
But it was a setup.
It was all a setup. And we see Judah. Judah comes forth and he says, I will put myself in his place as a surety. He uses the word that comes, arevin, the sense of, I will be in his place. I will be a trust for him. I will guarantee for him. And it is at that moment that Joseph reveals his identity, because he understands that's what's important. What's important is this trust relationship between one another. And that expression of trust becomes an expression used in later rabbinic thought to represent the responsibility we have to one another.
To one another.
To one another.
Not just to ourselves, but to our community.
To our community and to individuals. That when we say we are going to do something, when we put that surety, we say, this is my word.
My bond.
This is my reputation. It's all the things that happen in here. If once I say these things, I will do them. It's the basis of society, of civilization, of commerce, of economics. It is right there in that moment in our Torah portion, and it was right there present in the secular world as we saw going on. There's always something to find in the weekly Torah portion that is relevant. So there it was, that sense of trust.
When an individual dies and they meet God, Jews believe that it is said that there is a question that God asks. What is that question? First question.
Fascinating, this topic. There are several questions asked. When the soul goes to that other world, Olam Haba, it undergoes a period of a heavenly court. It's in a heavenly court where it is interviewed, essentially. And the rabbis say that the question that will be asked, the first question that will be asked, is, were you honest in business?
Say that again. First question asked will be, were you...
The first question asked is, were you honest in business? And,
Right.
and many people might naturally say, maybe it should have been, did you believe in God? Did you follow all the laws? Did you observe Shabbat or keep kosher? And Judaism focuses in time and again on things like ethics and morality and how we live on a day-to-day basis and how we treat one another. And so that focus, that remarkable focus of the rabbis, reminds us that if we don't have a trust relationship, then we don't have a society. And so there's a wonderful expression that comes from Deuteronomy. It says, and we read these on the high holy days.
Let's hear.
You must have completely honest weights and completely honest measures. If you do, you will long endure on the land that the Lord your God is giving you. There's only one of 3 or 4 times that we are told that if you follow this commandment, you will live for a long time, and you will live well. And this is one of them.
By being honest in your business dealings.
Honest weights and measures. So this idea that in those days, on the scales, when you weighed things from everything from gold to groceries,
Right.
you could slip something in or take something out to make the scales a different balance without anyone else knowing. That was the issue of trust. That was the issue of your word, your name, your reputation. And the rabbis understood that you can cheat, or possibly, you could cheat someone who doesn't know any better. You can cheat someone who's naive. Someone who's very wise can manipulate the scales. And if we have that, then we might as well say goodbye to civilization. And so that is the reason why I believe that's the first question that is asked. Because in the situations where we could take advantage of people the easiest, are you honest? In a situation where no one else could tell, where only you and God knows the truth, are you being honest in those situations? And that's why I believe it's the first question asked when our souls go to that other world.
You have to police yourself through your own integrity, your own ethics, and your own honesty. There's no one looking over your shoulder.
According to Judaism, as long as God is the ultimate police person,
Correct.
the ultimate standard of what's right and wrong, yes, but you are right. You're looking into the mirror of yourself and really of God as well. You are having that internal conversation with yourself and with God. That's the way it's looked at.
I'm going to present a statement and then a question, and it's a difficult one. And that is that many people today have associated Madoff's actions with time held anti-Semitic epithets. What do you say about that?
Well, as Rabbi Gelman said, he didn't cause these epithets, but he certainly revived them. But I think that what we need to do is realize that we're talking about the actions of one person here. And if we really break this situation down, we can see some of the more amazing qualities of the Jewish community. Because what were they doing? I believe that there's a value in Jewish homes to invest, to think about down the road, the future, our children and grandchildren, always having our mind on either what's going to be of my family when I'm not here, or of the community. And the charitable organizations, when you think about them, the incredible sums of money that were lost. Well, how did they get that? I was thinking of UJA and Hadassah, just to name a couple, Jewish organizations, charitable organizations that help people in the Jewish community, in Israel, and in the larger community as well, that had millions upon millions of dollars just flushed away in one afternoon. And what does this say? This says more about the Jewish community, that the Jewish community supports charitable organizations. This also goes back to the notion of Kol Yisrael Arevin Zevazeh. This word Arevin, in reference to Joseph, came up, this idea of being a surety. This verse comes from the Talmud, means all of Israel is responsible for one another, one for the other. And we could look at that as being responsible for every other Jew in the Jewish community, but we could also say that's responsible for every other person. We always have to be aware of how our actions impact everyone else around us, and that this situation reminds us, one, the Jewish community, the vast majority of the Jewish community is always concerned about the larger community, the individuals within the Jewish community. One person cannot represent everyone. And I think that we need to remove that sense that this is the entire Jewish community doing this.
It's because of what one person did.
But it was really one person.
Now, the concept of a Ponzi scheme has been around for about 100 years or so. And I think the gentleman's name was Ponzi, who started this. And it's still going on. It goes on all the time, actually. The difference is the scope. And because so many people, organizations and good people were hit severely by his actions, that's why it's looked upon, and the spotlight is on it, and it's shining so brightly. You talk about people affecting each other and being responsible for each other. Before the Madoff Ponzi scheme came to light, you look at the terrible collapse of the financial world, and indeed what's happened all over, and you see how we're all connected. And there were people who were very greedy and who did not look out for the rest of the world, just for making a quick buck. And that had nothing to do with Judaism or being a Protestant or being a Catholic or being a Hindu or whatever, any other religion you want. This was human nature. And Judaism preaches that you don't do this, and indeed, many other religions do as well. Yet, it happened. The few affected the majority and brought everything down. Then this thing comes along, and then this gets focused on only because it was one Jew preying upon, and that's with an E, not an A for praying. Preying upon, like a wolf with a sheep, upon his own kind. Because most of his victims, from what I understand, were Jewish.
Right.
And they trusted him. And he took advantage of the trust, which was just absolutely, which was horrific. Why do you think that his Jewish identity became a factor? And indeed, that's the reason why we're here discussing this today.
I mean,
it's in the newspapers and everything. I mean, why? I mean, as Rabbi Gelman said with Enron, I forgot his name. Kenley. Okay. Nobody made a thing about that.
It really boils down to the age-old question. And this question has been asked thousands of times. and I hate to say it, but it's why do they hate us? Why is it that the Jew becomes the scapegoat? There are so many examples throughout history where the Jews are blamed for things such as not only financial issues, but plagues, wars.
Right.
Why is it that the Jews are put into that position to be held up to some standard on one hand, but also to be held up as something to gawk at and to make fun of? So why do they hate us? Why do the anti-Semites hate us? And I have to say, I don't have a good answer for that.
Save that for another show.
But no, I mean, I don't know if there is a good answer. I mean, aside from...
We'll get some anti-Semites on here, and we'll ask them, now listen, just tell me, what's this all about?
I mean, I happen to believe it's because of ignorance. I happen to believe that anyone who knows individuals who are Jewish and who has gotten to know people of any faith or race or creed, that you can't make a judgment about an entirety of a group based on individual circumstances. You need to get to know people, and then all of a sudden those barriers come down. We need to make friends. We need to go outside of our own communities. And I am sometimes amazed exactly at this situation. Have any of these individuals who reported on Madoff met a Jew in their life? Because to say something like that is just... It doesn't have any basis in reality.
We have 2 minutes left. Amazing.
It is amazing.
Amazing how fast it goes. Quickly, how do you think the Jewish community is going to respond to all of this?
Well, I think the Jewish community is responding. I think that when you see articles with Rabbi Gelman, Rabbi Wolpe, many other Jews, but especially by the leaders in the Jewish community, saying, we are distancing ourselves from, even though this person is part of the Jewish community, what he did, what he's being accused of doing is wrong. And we are not going to just support him because he's Jewish. The Jewish community is setting up all sorts of opportunities, networking opportunities for people through synagogues, through UJA Federation, to help people out who have been adversely affected by this. And of course, we are sending out emails, even through my synagogue right now, telling people, if you can help set up, people now have to go back to work.
Can I interrupt you? Let me throw on the screen, the slate. Let me see if we can throw on the screen. If you want more information, you can contact Rabbi Chizner at Temple Judea in Manhasset, and you'll see the phone number up there. And they'll be more than happy to speak with you and to see if there's something you can do to help and to contribute in some way or another, whatever that might be.
Right.
But at least to be actively involved and to help, you know. I can't believe it. We're out of time. It's just amazing how fast the time goes. In 15, 20 seconds, any concluding comments?
Again, I think that one of my favorite expressions, and this is from Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the ancestors, is let your fellow's money be to you as precious as your own. And that we must, when we hold someone else's property, we must take care of it. We must say to ourselves, would I risk my own like this?
Under this circumstance.
Under any circumstances, and I must care for it and be this going back to this whole notion that I must be the surety for this item, whether it's money, whether it's an object, and that this is the basis of running a society.
You're so eloquent. I always love having you on. Rabbi Todd Chizner, thank you very much for coming down from your very busy schedule. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much for taking the time to watch it. I hope you gained something out of it. Very different show, very interesting show. And again, just like Rabbi Chizner, whatever you do it with passion, or what's the use? See you again next time.